Thank you very much. So I've been introduced already. I'm very happy to be here, very proud of being part of this community, and I've been very impressed by the quality of what we've witnessed over the past 2 days. So thank you all, and I'm looking forward for hearing today what our three research team will present you. So this session explores the risk factors for child labor, forced labor, human trafficking in three very distinct contexts, but with some common look at them, common way of looking at things. So I think the first is that the three presenters will really focus on identifying evidence-based solution. They look at individual in their context, taking decisions, and they will try to question this decision-making process and understand where the risk lie. And because people take decision given a certain context they're in, they will question this context, so the existing policies and their applicability. The link also between the research and the field practitioners to produce research that is relevant for those who then have to help these populations. And also, I think you'll be interested with the variety of approach with regard to methodology and collecting data or using existing databases. So I hope you'll enjoy. We are going to use 20-25 minutes per speakers, and then 5 minutes of a discussion at the end of each presentation because of their very specific context and approach to the topic. We thought that would be better. I will remind of the time 5 minutes before the end. And with no further ado, I leave the floor to Lucy and her team.
Great. So, okay, thank you all. I am Lucy Jordan, and I am working today sharing the presentation with my colleagues Isla Wilson from Migrazia. You'll learn more about Migrazia in a moment. And then also Junji Zhang, who is currently a PhD student here at the University of Hong Kong. And we are really excited to share this research with you that we are in the process of still a bit, so you'll see that in what we're talking about, and we really look forward to interesting discussion afterwards. So I will pass over to Isla Wilson for the first part of the presentation. Isla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucy, and thanks for the introduction. So yeah, to reiterate, I'm Isla, I'm the program manager at Migrazia, and I'm going to be introducing today a little bit about Migrazia as well as the social problem that Migrazia's anti-trafficking intervention seeks to address. So from our view, the social problem stems from a lack of sufficient access to information on safe migration and ethical recruitment for migrant workers, particularly low-skilled migrant workers or migrant domestic workers in the Hong Kong context. We know that migration intermediaries, such as employment agencies and training centers, are essential in the efficient matching of labor supply and demand. However, unfortunately, fraudulent and coercive practices seem commonplace within the industry. So migration intermediaries will often take advantage of the asymmetries of information and power with migrant workers to charge exorbitant recruitment fees for the placement of migrant workers in jobs. So how does this relate to forced labor? If you could go to the next slide, Lucy. Great, thanks. So we know that migrant workers will often take on substantial debt in order to finance these recruitment-related costs and fees, which exposes them to further risk and can make them more likely to accept unfair or dangerous working conditions, and can also lead to a situation of debt bondage, which we know is a key indicator of forced labor. So what is our solution to this? So a little intro to Migration. Migration is a social enterprise that works on solutions to migration-related problems in Asia, with the primary goal of eliminating forced labor and exploitation of migrant workers using a range of different solutions. Next slide. How do we do this? So Migration implements a cyclical system consisting of 4 program pillars, whereby each pillar generates data and information that feeds into and directs the following pillars. So beginning with direct client support to migrant workers and victims of forced labor, followed by enforcement of unethical migration intermediaries and access to remedy for migrant workers that have been exploited or overcharged, as well as research and community engagement. For the purpose of the presentation, we're going to focus on the first pillar, the client support pillar, and in particular, the social media victim identification and support system, which is the subject of our research. Next slide. Yeah, so what is our social media victim identification system? So at Migration, we leverage social media to facilitate real-time migrant worker engagement, to provide information to migrant workers, to prevent exploitation, to educate and inform, to crowdsource data about perpetrators, as well as to identify, triage, assist, and refer victims of forced labor and trafficking to the appropriate services. So our social media system includes a network of Facebook pages and groups, and we provide tailored assistance via these pages and groups to migrant workers at each step of the way. And the flowchart on your screen demonstrates and highlights a little bit how migrant workers are triaged through our social media system. This is all facilitated by a team of virtual analysts that are based in the Philippines and Kenya, that have been trained in dealing with a range of cases from agency recruitment or exploitation or overcharging, as well as moneylender concerns or employment or employer concerns. Next slide. So I want to delve into a little bit more about the theory of change for Migration's social media system, and particularly how our Facebook posts actually lead to remedy for migrant workers, among other outcomes. So the system begins with the posting of content on Facebook. So our virtual analysts will create Facebook posts or content that are intended to educate and inform migrant workers around safe migration, migrant rights, as well as unethical recruitment. And these posts are designed in a way to elicit emotion, to identify clearly a problem and potentially the perpetrator of that problem, and include a call to action that Facebook users can actually directly respond to. So these posts should generate some kind of user engagement in the form of likes, comments, or shares on social media. And we have had a fair amount of success with generating engagement, reaching up to 1 million engagements per month across all of our Facebook pages. And based on the engagement on these posts, we can then identify potential victims of trafficking or forced labor and triage these victims into Facebook groups or group chats that are more thematically focused based on the problem that they're facing, or into private inboxes where they can be provided with private one-on-one assistance. So we'll then conduct a range of different actions. This can include triaging individuals into peer-to-peer support groups so they can meet with and share evidence with and discuss with other potential victims, explanation of their rights and the laws and details surrounding their case. We also engage in some online self-help, so sharing of educational resources, tutorials, and guides, direct online casework, so filing of online complaints or online problem resolution, and support materials, all generated again by our virtual analysts. And then finally, direct in-person support via referral, either to our internal team or to other lawyers, law firms, or NGOs. And so all of these actions should lead into kind of several buckets of potential outcomes. So we have the intermediate outcomes, which are a little bit more difficult to measure, but these include things like community education, prevention of exploitation, promotion of safe migration and empowerment and community building through our Facebook pages. We also have then the more tangible access to remedy for migrant workers that have been exploited. So this can include things like fees, recruitment fees being refunded, passports being returned, debt being canceled, or other financial compensation or resolution of legal concerns. And then finally, across our system, we have kind of the larger outcomes of data and enforcement. So at each stage of the process, we are collecting data and aggregating this data to identify exploitation patterns and trends, as well as common case typologies and indicators of forced labor. And this aggregated data will then be used to direct enforcement against unethical actors and syndicates, as well as for crowdsourcing of evidence and witnesses for the prosecution of perpetrators. So this is kind of a brief introduction to our social media system. And I'm going to pass over now to Lucy, who's going to discuss a little bit more about the research objectives and methodology.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Isla. And yeah, good timekeeping. Okay, so the research objective, you're just seeing kind of a big picture of migrasia. It's actually quite a complex, I think kind of multi-layered intervention. And we are aiming to, in this project, assess the feasibility of using a more larger scale randomized controlled trial to evaluate the effectiveness of behavioral change techniques applied in social media campaigns such as this. So in particular, right, to try to prevent migrant workers from being overcharged on recruitment fees and related costs, which leads to the de facto debt bondage and human trafficking as defined by the US State Department, as well as providing support and access to redress for those who have already been overcharged and breaking the cycle of debt bondage and human trafficking. So we are applying a mixed methodology approach where we're using secondary data, so the data analytics, which we're going to talk more about in depth today, also desk review analysis, and then the primary data collection analysis. So the study one involves elements of inductive content review, sentiment analysis, topic modeling of Facebook posts with the highest levels of engagement to categorize variables that are likely to influence virility. And then the primary data collection analysis focuses on what we call study two, which are in-depth interviews with migrant workers that have both been successful or not in receiving direct remediation, which we're defining here as recruitment fees refunded or passports returned in the instance when they've been removed, which is a common thing that happens in this kind of a circumstance. Via instruction that's provided through social media. So having this happen as a result of the intervention. And then the third is semi-structured interviews with top fans of pages to identify underlying reasons for engagement. So all of these components then together, hoping to wrap them up in a proof of concept for a larger scale RCT. So one of the first things we did when we started our collaboration, honestly, was spend a bit of time thinking about the overarching research framework, so kind of how we were going to tie these things together. I'm just getting my clock timer in front of me more clearly. How we're going to tie these things together based on literature. And also, thinking about then, how that maps on to the different components of the theory of change, of migrasia, as well as, some of the emerging literature from the more machine-driven approaches of data analytics. So we're looking at the message characteristics, and so in particular, focusing then in on framing and heuristics. Thinking about the support-seeking behaviors. So, these more kind of instrumental, informational, and emotional aspects. And then these harder outcomes, which, as we mentioned, are sort of the easier thing to measure. The money repaid, the passport returned. And then the studies you can see kind of map, one onto each other, all to help us hopefully better articulate strategies to increase the content engagement of migrant domestic workers in future intervention. I think someone is unmuted, maybe Karen. Yeah, thanks. So a little bit more about framing theory. For those that aren't familiar, I think it's somewhat intuitive if you're not, specifically familiar with it, right? But the idea, about shaping the meaning of an object by using different kinds of communicative strategies to either highlight or to downplay certain aspects of that. So specifically thinking around the social media campaigns, framing can help to explain how certain ways of presenting a message can either increase or decrease their target audience's interest, attention, and sense of urgency to take action. And we are, in particular, with some of the elements of our project using framing theory as defined by Snow and Benford about the extent to which a message engages with the audience effectively, depending on whether it attends to diagnostic, prognostic, or motivational tasks. And at this stage of the study, where we're at in a minute, we are conducting a content analysis of posts and social media attributes. We selected one page from Migrazia's suite of Facebook pages to examine the association between framing and the level of user engagement. So study one, and what we're going to present a bit more of the preliminary findings on today is the aspect that I've shaded into gray. So this is exploring how various context and content features are associated with social media engagement, the number of unique people who are engaged in certain ways with the page post, for example, by commenting on, liking, sharing, or clicking upon elements of the post. And then ultimately, we are going to be pulling this together with aspects of the inductive content coding and the interviews as mentioned with the clients that have been successful and unsuccessful, as well as the top fans. So now I'm going to turn over to JJ, who is going to share about the analysis.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Ayla. Hello, everyone. I'm JJ, also from University of Hong Kong. And so the research object of our first study is to identify different features that are associated with post engagement. So this study is based on the theory of framing. However, the traditional theory of framing is highly related on the semantic meaning of things. And when it comes to the world of social media, we have tons of multi-model information. So I think the very first step is to identify the key components that are associated with engagement and could help us to understand this new mechanism of framing. And now I'm going to just introduce the structure of our data. With the help of Migratia, we collected 1,500 original Facebook posts posted between October 2020 to March 2022. And we have 4 different types of social media posts. Most of them are photo posts. Next page, please. And based on previous studies and our own experience, we developed a feature extraction plan. We extract features from 3 dimensions. For the text features, we collect the number of special characters such as period, comma, exclamation, hashtag, emoji used in each post. And we also count the number of positive words and negative words in each post. For the image features, we have 2 main components. For the color-related features, we calculate the value of colorfulness. We also calculate the value of hue, saturation, and lightness. For the content-related features, we use the Google Cloud Vision and a pre-trained VGG16 network model to conduct the text detection, face detection, and the object detection. For the context features, we calculate 3 time-based variables. They are day of time, day of week, and day of months to represent when the posts are made. Next page, please. So now I'm going to just share some really interesting descriptive results. So our outcome variable, the post engagement, is a little bit polarized. And we also found that there is a fairly large within group diversity in the use of period, comma, exclamation, hashtag, and emoji in each post. And on average, our posts are more positive than negative. And for the context variables, February has the most posts, followed by January and March. And Monday has the most posts, followed by Tuesday and Thursday. And more than 50% of posts are posted after 8 p.m. And for the image features, based on the colorfulness value, we can say the images are pretty colorful. And the result of text detection show our images are pretty text heavy. And the website and the menu are the two most frequently identified objects in posts. Next page, please. Also, we run 2 regression models to test to find associations between these features and the post engagement. The goal of regression number 1 is to test if there's any text features and the context features could predict post engagements. Next page, please. So the overall regression is significant, and for the detailed features, we find the post type, the number of period, comma, hashtag, emoji, and the number of positive words, and the post posted in December, November, May, March, February, and January. These variables are associated with post engagement. Next page, please. For the regression model number 2, we add another dimension of features, that's image features. And we want to test if there's any text, context, or image features could predict post engagement. This time we reduce our sample size to around 600 because we only include the post with photos. Next page, please. The result also told us the number of positive words, number of negative words, and posted in December, May, February, January. Also the appearance of clock, band-aid, book jacket, envelope, parcel, shower cap, and the website. These variables are associated with post engagements. Next page, please. Just a little summary and the limitations of the analysis we've done so far. So based on the result, we can say we find some text, context, and image features are associated with post engagements. And I think these results are really important. It gives us a direction to think about what we can dig deep in the next stage. However, the limitation we have is right now we only include text and images in our sample size, and other types of media such as the status, link, and the video are not included. And also right now we only consider the English language in our sample. That's it, Lucy.
Excellent. Thank you, JJ. And so I'm just going to wrap up. I think we're almost at the edge of our time too, so it's perfect. We just kind of have one more slide. Thank you both, Isla and JJ, for really interesting presentations. It's nice to see it all come together here. So I wanted just to wrap up with a few things on the next steps, because it kind of rounds out what our project is focusing on. So with the continuation in study 1, we're working on refining the machine-driven approach to post-analysis, in particular by doing a piece of work to integrate what we call human coding of framing features to help identify diagnostic, prognostic, and motivational frames, and see how we could then use that information, to better instruct, kind of the modeling that we're using through the machine-driven approach. And we will be working with the virtual assistants in the Philippines that are part of Magrezia to help integrate the Tagalog language, into usable information for those of us that are not Tagalog speaking. And then for study 2 and 3, we are going to be conducting a small-scale primary data collection to facilitate our understanding of the triage and assistance process from engagement to outcome, the successful, unsuccessful remediation to evaluate the interim outcomes on, for example, education and empowerment. And then overall, by tying the things together, we hope to be able to put forward a more specific design that is tailored to try to encourage a higher rate of successful outcomes as regards to remediation and also ultimately prevention. And then the final thing that I want to mention on a more academic note is that we also recognize that framing may or may not be the best theory to apply to the machine-driven approach, and that we will be considering some alternative kinds of scholarship, such as LWC, language inquiry word count, that is quite well established at helping to integrate computerized textual analysis with some of the more communications-driven media literature from that perspective. So we welcome any comments and questions, and also any suggestions too. Since we're in process, we are really interested in people's feedback. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Lucy and team, for this great presentation. Is there anyone with a question in the room?
Cecile, may I? Just a curiosity. By looking at the last, maybe I missed something, the two regression that Sunji was showing us. This is to measure a little bit, okay, the post engagement, right? For example, from the first model, I saw, by looking at the sign, we have a little bit of positive or negative sign according to the month. How do you interpret this? What is your feeling? Because I see while the second regression, when you reduce the mode, the sample goes in one direction. The first one is a little bit different. So I'm curious, really, what's the interpretation there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting. So I don't know, Isla might have something to say, but I mean, so my perspective would be that it has some to do with the cycle of the year in regards to when people have more time off. You know, for example, that's one possibility, or, you know, when it is interesting, like, to me, this is interesting dynamic, Lorenzo, where it's like, say we have to think about the cycle of holidays and time off in Hong Kong, but also in the Philippines, and they don't always coincide together. So, you know, so for example, you know, usually we're going to see the Chinese New Year in February and January, and there's a lot of time off then. Yeah. But likewise, you know, December, like the month of December is quite, you know, often a lot of time off in the Philippines because of Christmas. So I tend to think about it a bit from the perspective that it may have some to do with when there's sort of a volume, you know, of people involved, and, you know, and likely to have more time to be using social media. But and then, you know, there's also, right, the likelihood that it could have some to do with the timing of Magrasia's interventions in their, right, you know, in their posting, for example, since, you know, they seed things. So I think there are a lot of different angles about how to interpret. And, you know, so as you rightly probably can see, part of what we're doing by adopting the machine-driven approach kind of first, in a way, is trying to see, like, what does the machine come up with? Does that make sense, kind of thing, right? You know, like without much guidance, so to speak, you know, and because, you know, we have had a lot of very interesting conversations in our team between people with different epistemological backgrounds, actually, too, you know, sort of about the nature of, you know, how we answer social science questions. So yeah, so I think that's, and then I guess, you know, and what's interesting to me when I look at this too, right, is we can see sort of there's like the negative and positive, right? So that then adds another layer, you know, about, you know, so something is being, you know, it's decreasing the impact, or, you know, increasing the impact based on based on the calendar. Yeah.
Lucy, you know what? Because it's very interesting. I mean, this way of looking at this data. Maybe it would be nice to have some visual. accompanying this, like you were describing, because now in my mind I have, when we were doing some research on agriculture and showing some of the results that fit with the seasonal pattern, something that is very intuitive and very nice then to see.
Yes.
Because especially if you cross with, I mean, when people have time or there are holidays, but the intervention period, that would be really good. So
definitely,
that's
definitely.
Yeah,
no, that's great. Thank you, Lorenzo. Yeah, I see. And Cecil, I'm not going to jump into your job. I'll let you. I see someone has their hand up.
Thank you.
Nice, thanks,
Lorenzo. There's a hand raised here, Quintin.
Sure, thanks, Cecile. I was just curious, I guess, super interesting. Thank you for sharing all the learning around this. I'm from an organization called Just Good Work in the UK, and we take a very similar social media approach to outreach to migrant workers across a whole range of different contexts. And I guess particularly the first bit of the learning that you've shared today is around the Facebook engagement. Is the literature that you based some of this on also based on sort of broader, do you draw in broader learning from say marketing outreach approaches through different social media channels? So in other words, I guess, what sort of broad mass social media appeal approaches work in terms of connecting with people generally? Does that feed in also into your analysis and some of the approach?
Isla, do you want to say anything? I'm happy to, but I don't want to. I want to give you a chance to answer questions too.
Yeah, sure. So from the migration perspective, I think it is interesting because when we looked at the literature around framing, we realized that without necessarily considering the literature too intently, we did strike on some of the similar ways of framing a post such that it elicits more engagement. So I think our colleagues did some preliminary research, as you mentioned, around marketing approaches for generating engagement. So those things that I mentioned in constructing a post around eliciting emotion, identifying blame in some circumstances, and framing a problem and creating a call to action. Those were the things that we drew from, I think, more marketing theory to inform our posts, but it was very much on a trial and error basis to see what would work. And so I think that kind of loosely informed our social media theory, but other things we can't explain. And so that's why the research is also helpful. I think, for us, certain things like long lists of agencies and things would generate a lot of engagement. And actually, we've got some examples of posts later in the slides if it's worth sharing at some point, or we could look at it later. But so I think the research will be useful to help explain some of those things that we couldn't quite understand. So if you go to the previous slide.
Previous one,
So this was our most this was the post that had the most engagement of all time. But it's a list of agencies, but like I mentioned, we identify the problem as being overcharging of recruitment fees, identify that there's a potential for access to remedy in terms of filing a complaint, including the statute of limitations, and then providing a kind of direct call to action in terms of very simply like messaging the page or commenting with what happened to you, and that seemed to generate a lot of engagement for us.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that quickly, I mean, I know there's some other really interesting questions too, but Quentin, thank you for the question. And I mean, Isla touched on it, but when we started working together, we had a lot of very interesting, I mean, the kind of discussions as an academic, you're just like, oh, I love these conversations because they're so fascinating. And it was because we were practice and research talking together and, having this, this discussion about their, sort of what I would call practice wisdom and intuition about, things, but also perhaps informed a bit by the founder of Migratia actually is based in the business school. So, probably influenced even by inadvertently by, some things to do with some of the theories around, marketing. And we also had someone from a communications and media background in our research team. So, we were exploring the communication literature, quite deeply. But actually, we haven't dug in as deep into some of the marketing stuff. But again, I think, another element, there's a lot of different, sort of, I guess, baskets of literature and things to, to think about. And one of the really enriching things about this project so far has been, just these interesting discussions across disciplines, and then also, across kind of position in the ecosystem, so to speak, of service and research.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to read the 2 questions that are in the chat to you, and then let you reply to both of them. So there's a question with David that had a parallel discussion with Isla during the presentation. So David is asking about perpetrator retribution sparked by social media activity triggered by your outreach. So helping file complaints may connect to this, but how is incidence measured, if at all? Do not harm. And then there's a question by Guy. How could a gap be bridged in countries where one wouldn't expect migrant workers to be on social media due to lack of financial literacy?
Great. So, okay, I'll take a quick stab and then, somebody has to do it. The perpetrator question is super interesting. I mean, I think, it's not something that we have talked about. My guess is that they may have spoken about it at Migratia at some point in time, like from the service perspective, but I do think that's a really important part of something that it would be important for us to pay attention to how we might be able to try to tease some of that out. And it is something perhaps we could find out some in our direct client interviews too, if if it's come up in their experience and their stories. And then the other piece I think was the one about the bridging the gap. So I think, I mean, so due to lack of financial literacy, and, but also even like say with the population that we're talking about, which are kind of these migrant domestic workers, we know more anecdotally that migrant workers that go, say, to the Middle East may be less likely to be able to have as much access to their mobile phones, even if they have them. So there's other ways that access can be restricted. So I think that it would be very important to think about different mechanisms and mediums for for intervening in other ways to reach populations, whether for kind of socioeconomic reasons or also for the reasons of restriction and confinement are not able to meet things. And so I think that's is a useful feedback to have. And in fact, I would even say, there are some migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong that I see sometimes and that don't have smartphones too, right? Even in today's era of smartphones everywhere, there are some that don't. So again, they could be populations that lose out.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think the conversation could keep on, but we need to leave the floor to our next speaker. So
then the last thing I was going to say was I forgot to say a big thank you to our team there. So I just want to say that there's more than us that presented, and without them we would not be able to do the work we're doing. So thanks a lot.